The day I received the first press release announcing James' memoir, my computer guy was busy trying to chase some virus from the machine. Now this guy, he's called Paul, he happens to be an ex-student of mine from the days I still taught English. When I had read the press release, I said to Paul, listen to this, let's see what you make of it. And I read him the following piece. Imagine waking up on a plane with no idea where you have been or where you're going. Imagine that your front teeth are missing, your nose is broken, and there's a gash on your cheek. Imagine that you have no wallet, no money, no job. Imagine that you have been an alcoholic for 10 years and a crack addict for 3. What would you do? Paul looked at me and he said, well, that sounds like a book I want to read. And then he got this nasty grin on his face and said, in any case, it sounds better than the stuff that you made me read. In the weeks that followed, Paul regularly asked me if I had already interviewed this airplane guy. The little story I had read to him had clearly intrigued him. It had intrigued me too for a moment, but when I realized that A Million Little Pieces would be the umpteenth book about the trials and tribulations of a junkie, my spirit started to sink. The blurb by Bret Easton Ellis didn't help either. The all-embracing book about addiction for today's generation, Bret shouted from the cover, which made A Million Little Pieces sound like some sort of self-help book. It was James Frey himself who wiped away all prejudice and doubt. After having read a couple of pages, I knew Frey was one of the few writers who had really found his own voice. And now I'm standing here before you with the impossible task to introduce James Frey to you, his Dutch audience. Impossible, because A Million Little Pieces is a debut, so I cannot tell you about the other books James wrote. I cannot go into his themes, subjects, his development as a writer. Also, I cannot tell you anything about his life. Well, I could, but the story of his life is more or less the story of A Million Little Pieces. And as a former teacher, I'm confident that you guys out there have all done your homework. For those of you who haven't, I mean, there's always a valid excuse like I had to take my pet rabbit to the vets. I'll summarize the book in a few sentences. The airplane guy from the piece I just read is taken to a rehabilitation center by his parents and his brother. There he decides to fight his addiction his own way. No religion-fueled 12-step program for him. James puts his money on a little book called the Tao Te Ching. The wisdom he finds in there pulls him through. At the tender age of 23, he had already been an addict for about 10 years. He left the center sober and has remained so to this very day. In the meantime, he has worked as a film writer, a skateboard salesman, a camp counselor, a security guard, a busboy, a producer, a director, and last but certainly not least, as both Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny at a major department store. And now finally, he seems to have found the profession he loves the most, a writer of literary books, a writer who produced a stunning debut called A Million Little Pieces. Maybe it's time to tell you what I personally like about the book. I love James, pardon my French, cut the bullshit style. No endless he said, she said sequences, but just the quotations. No boring descriptions of features, clothes, scenery, or interior decoration. No sophisticated flashbacks or fancy monologue intérieur. This book made me think of John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band albums. Like Lennon, James Frey achieves the maximum by using the minimum. Both artists shout Give me some truth. Both artists seem to be, to paraphrase one of Lennon's songs, sick and tired of reading things by tight-lipped, condescending, egocentric prima donnas. Like Lennon's stripped-to-the-bone rock and roll, a million miles away from the sophistication of Sgt. Pepper's, the naked prose of James Frey shocked people and turned critics away sometimes. Some tight-lipped, condescending prima donnas even reached the "this ain't no literature" verdict. The internationally renowned author and filmmaker Gus Van Sant wasn't one of them. He loved Frey's honest and humorous style and decided to make a movie out of a million little pieces. With a star like Brad Pitt playing the part of James, we probably won't be bored for a minute. Still, Mr. Van Sant and Mr. Pitt will, in this case, encounter some stiff competition. Here in Holland, whenever a book has been taken to the silver screen, we tend to say, in a rather tongue-in-cheek fashion, "Nice movie, but the book was better." Talking about the million little pieces, they just might repeat that phrase, but this time in a serious way. Because a million little pieces, the book, has all the traits of an invincible opponent. James Frey.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. Thank you, John Adams Institute, for having me, and Prometheus for having me, and thank you all for coming. I don't really ever give speeches. I don't have anything pre-prepared to say to you. When I do things like this, I usually just read the first couple chapters of my book, and then I answer questions if you have any. If you do have any, don't hesitate to ask something. I will pretty much answer anything you ask, and if I won't, I'll just say I won't. So that's it. I'm gonna read a little bit to y'all, and we'll take it from there. A million little pieces. The young man came to the old man seeking counsel. I broke something, old man. How badly is it broken? It's in a million little pieces. I'm afraid I can't help you. Why? There's nothing you can do. Why? It can't be fixed. Why? It's broken beyond repair. It's in a million little pieces. I wake to the drone of an airplane engine and the feeling of something warm dripping down my chin. I lift my hand to feel my face. My front 4 teeth are gone. I have a hole in my cheek. My nose is broken and my eyes are swollen nearly shut. I open them and I look around me, and I'm in the back of a plane and there's no one near me. I look at my clothes, and my clothes are covered with a colorful mixture of spit, snot, urine, vomit, and blood. I reach for the call button and I find it and I push it and I wait, and 30 seconds later an attendant arrives. How can I help you? Where am I going? You don't know? No. You're going to Chicago, sir. How'd I get here? A doctor and 2 men brought you on. They say anything? They talked to the captain, sir. We were told to let you sleep. How long till we land? About 20 minutes. Thank you. Although I never look up, I know she smiles and feels sorry for me. She shouldn't. A short while later, we touch down. I look around for anything I might have with me, but there's nothing. No ticket, no bags, no clothes, no wallet. I sit and I wait and I try to figure out what happened. Nothing comes. Once the rest of the passengers are gone, I stand and I start to make my way to the door. After about 5 steps, I sit back down. Walking is out of the question. I see my attendant friend and I raise a hand. Are you okay? No. What's wrong? I can't really walk. If you make it to the door, I can get you a chair. How far is the door? Not far. I stand, wobble, sit back down. I stare at the floor and I take a deep breath. You'll be all right. I look up and she's smiling. Here. She holds out her hand and I take it. I stand and I lean against her and she helps me down the aisle. We get to the door. I'll be right back. I let go of her hand and I sit down on the steel bridge of the jetway that connects the plane to the gate. I'm not going anywhere. She laughs and I watch her walk away and I close my eyes. My head hurts, my mouth hurts, my eyes hurt, my hands hurt. Things without name hurt. I rub my stomach. I can feel it coming, fast and strong and burning. No way to stop it, just close your eyes and let it ride. It comes and I recoil from the stench and the pain. There's nothing I can do. Oh my God! I open my eyes. I'm all right. Let me find a doctor. I'll be fine. Just get me out of here. Can you stand? Yeah, I can stand. I stand and I brush myself off and I wipe my hands on the floor and I sit down in the wheelchair she's brought me. She goes around to the back of the chair and she starts pushing. Is someone here for you? I hope so. You don't know? No. What if no one's there? It's happened before. I'll find my way. We come off the jetway and into the gate. Before I have a chance to look around me, my mother and father are standing in front of me. Oh, Jesus, please, Mom. Oh, my God, what happened? I don't want to talk about it, Mom. Jesus Christ, Jimmy, what in the hell happened? She leans over and she tries to hug me. I push her away. Let's just get out of here, Mom. My dad goes around to the back of the chair. I look for the attendant, but she has disappeared. Bless her. You okay, James? I stare straight ahead. No, Dad, I'm not okay. He starts pushing the chair. Do you have any bags? My mother continues crying. No. People are staring. Do you need anything? I need to get out of here, Dad. Just get me the fuck out of here. They wheel me to their car. I climb in the back seat and I take off my shirt and I lie down. My dad starts driving. My mom keeps crying. I fall asleep. About 4 hours later, I wake up. My head is clear, but everything throbs. I sit forward and I look out the window. We've pulled into a filling station somewhere in Wisconsin. There's no snow on the ground, but I can feel the cold. My dad opens the driver's door and he sits down and he closes the door. I shiver. You're awake? Yeah. How you feeling? Shitty. Your mom's inside cleaning up and getting supplies. You need anything? Bottle of water and a couple bottles of wine and a pack of cigarettes. Seriously? Yeah. This is bad, James. I need it. You can't wait? No. This will upset your mother. I don't care. I need it. He opens the door and he goes into the filling station. I lie back down and I stare at the ceiling. I can feel my heart quickening and I hold out my hand and I try to keep it straight. I hope they hurry. 20 minutes later, the bottles are gone. I sit up and light a smoke and take a slug of water. Mom turns around. Better, if you want to put it that way. We're going to the cabin, I figured. We're going to decide what to do when we get there. All right. What do you think? I don't want to think. You're going to have to soon. Then I'll wait till that comes. We head north to the cabin. Along the way, I learned that my parents, who live in Tokyo, have been in the States for the last 2 weeks on business. At 4 a.m., they received a call from a friend of mine who was with me at a hospital and had tracked them down at a hotel. He told them that I had fallen face first down a fire escape and that he thought they should find me some help. He didn't know what I was on, but he knew there was a lot of it and he knew it was bad. They had driven to Chicago during the night. So what was it? What was what? What were you taking? I'm not sure. How can you not be sure? I don't remember. What do you remember? Bits and pieces? Like what? I don't remember. We drive on, and after a few hard, silent minutes, we arrive. We get out of the car and we go into the house, and I take a shower because I need it. When I get out, there's some fresh clothes sitting on my bed. I put them on and I go to my parents' room. They're up drinking coffee and talking, but when I come in, they stop. Hi. My mom starts crying again and she looks away. Dad looks at me. Feeling better? No. You should get some sleep. I'm gonna. Good. I look at my mom. She can't look back at me. I look away. I look away. I can't look at them. I just wanted to say thanks for picking me up. Dad smiles, takes my mother by the hand, and they stand and they come over to me and they give me a hug. I don't like it when they touch me, so I pull away. Good night. Good night, James. We love you. I turn and I leave their room and I close their door and I go to the kitchen. I look through the cabinets and I find an unopened half-gallon bottle of whiskey. The first sip brings my stomach back up, but after that it's all right. I go to my room and I drink and I smoke some cigarettes and I think about her. I drink and I smoke and I think about her, and at a certain point blackness comes and my memory fails me. back in the car with a headache and bad breath. We're heading north and west to Minnesota. My father made some calls and got me into a clinic, and I don't have any other options, so I agree to spend some time there, and for now I'm fine with it. It's getting colder. My face has gotten worse, and it's hideously swollen. I have trouble speaking, eating, drinking, smoking. I have yet to look in a mirror. We stop in Minneapolis to see my older brother. He moved there after getting divorced and knows how to get to the clinic. He sits with me in the back seat, and he holds my hand, and it helps me because I'm scared. We pull into the parking lot and park the car, and I finish a bottle, and we get out, and we start walking toward the entrance. Me and my brother and my mother and my father, my entire family, going to the clinic. I stop, and they stop with me. I stare at the buildings, low and long and connected, functional, simple, and menacing. I want to run or die or get fucked up. I want to be blind and dumb and have no heart. I want to crawl in a hole and never come out. I want to wipe my existence straight off the map. Straight off the fucking map. I take a deep breath. Let's go. We enter a small waiting room. A woman sits behind a desk reading a fashion magazine. She looks up. My father steps forward and speaks with her as my mother and brother and I find chairs and sit in them. I'm shaking. My hands, my feet, my lips, my chest. Shaking for any number of reasons. My mother and brother sit next to me and they take my hands and they hold them and they can feel what's happening to me. We look at the floor and we don't speak. We wait, hold hands, breathe, think. My father finishes with the woman and he turns around and he stands in front of us. He looks happy and the woman's on the phone. He kneels down. They're going to check you in now. All right, you're going to be fine. This is a good place, the best place. Yeah, you ready? I guess so. We stand and move toward a small room where a man sits behind a desk with a computer. He meets us at the door. I'm sorry, but you have to leave him here. My father nods. We'll check him in and you can call later to make sure he's all right. My mother breaks down. He's in the right place, don't worry. My brother looks away. He's in the right place. I turn and they hug me. One at a time, they hold tight. Squeezing and holding, I show them what I can. I turn and without a word, I walk into the room and the man shuts the door and they're gone. The man shows me a chair and returns to his desk. He smiles. Hi. Hello. How are you? How do I look? Not good. I feel worse. Your name is James. You're 23. You live in North Carolina. Yup. You're going to stay with us for a while. You okay with that? For now. Do you know anything about this facility? No. Do you want to know anything? I don't give a shit. He smiles, stares at me for a moment, speaks. We're the oldest residential drug and alcohol treatment facility in the world. We were founded in 1949 in an old house that sat on the land where these buildings, and there are 32 interconnected buildings here, sit now. We have treated over 20,000 patients. We have the highest success rate of any facility in the world. At any given time, there are between 200 and 250 patients spread through 6 units, 3 of which house men and 3 of which house women. We believe that patients should stay here for as long a term as they need, not something as specific as a 28 or 30-day program. Although it is expensive to come here, many of our patients are here on scholarships that we fund and through subsidies that we support. We have an endowment of several $100 million. We not only treat patients, we're also one of the leading research and educational institutions in the field of addiction studies. You should consider yourself fortunate to be here, and you should be excited to start a new chapter in your life. I stare at the man. I don't speak. He stares back at me, waiting for me to say something. There's an awkward moment. He smiles. You ready to get started? I don't smile. Sure. He gets up and I get up and we walk down the hall. He talks and I don't. The doors are always open here, so if you want to leave, you can. Substance use is not allowed, and if you're caught using or possessing, you will be sent home. You're not allowed to say anything more than hello to any women aside from doctors, nurses, or staff members. If you violate this rule, you will be sent home. There are other rules, but those are the only ones you need to know right now. We walk through a door into a medical wing. There are small rooms and doctors and nurses and a pharmacy. The pharmacy cabinets have large steel locks. He shows me to a room. It has a bed and a desk and a chair and a closet and a window. Everything is white. He stands at the door and I sit on the bed. A nurse will be here in a few minutes to talk with you. Fine. You feel okay? No, I feel like shit. It'll get better. Yeah. Trust me. Yeah. The man leaves and he shuts the door and I'm alone. My feet bounce. I touch my face. I run my tongue along my gums. I'm cold and getting colder. I hear someone scream. The door opens and a nurse walks into the room. She wears white, all white, and she's carrying a clipboard. She sits in the chair by the desk. Hi, James. Hi. I need to ask you some questions. All right. I also need to check your blood pressure and your pulse. All right. What type of substances do you normally use? Alcohol? Every day? Yeah. What time do you start drinking? When I wake up. She marks it down. How much per day? As much as I can. How much is that? Enough to make myself look like this. She looks at me. She marks it down. Do you use anything else? Cocaine. How often? Every day. She marks it down. How much? As much as I can. She marks it down. In what form? Lately crack, but over the years in every form that it exists. She marks it down. Anything else? Whatever I can get. What's that? Whatever the fuck I can get. She marks it down. How often? Whenever I can get it. How often? A few times a week. She marks it down. She moves forward and draws out a stethoscope. How are you feeling? Terrible. In what way? In every way. She reaches for my shirt. Do you mind? No. She lifts my shirt and she puts the stethoscope to my chest. She listens. Breathe deeply. She listens. Good. Do it again. She lowers my shirt and she pulls away and she marks it down. Thank you. I smile. Are you cold? Yeah. She has a blood pressure gauge. Do you feel nauseous? Yeah. She straps it on my arm and it hurts. When was the last time you used? She pumps it up. A little while ago. What and how much? I drank a bottle of vodka. How does that compare to your normal daily dosage? Doesn't. She watches the gauge and the dials move and she marks it down and she removes the gauge. I'm going to leave for a little while, but I'll be back. I stare at the wall. We need to monitor you carefully and we'll probably need to give you some detoxification drugs. I see a shadow and I think it moves, but I'm not sure. You're fine right now, but I think you'll start to feel some things. I see another one. I hate it. If you need me, just call. I hate it. She stands and she smiles and she puts the chair back and she leaves. I take off my shoes and I lie under the blankets and I close my eyes and I fall asleep. I wake and I start to shiver and I curl up and I clench my fists. Sweat runs down my chest, my arms, the back of my legs. It stings my face. I sit up and I hear someone moan. I see a bug in the corner, but I know it's not there. The walls close in and expand. They close in and expand, and I can hear them moving. I cover my ears, but it's not enough. I stand. I look around me. I don't know anything. Where I am, why, what happened, how to escape, my name, my life. I curl up on the floor and I'm crushed by images and sounds, things I've never seen or heard or knew even existed. They come from the ceiling, the door, the window, the desk, the chair, the bed, the closet. They're coming from the fucking closet. Dark shadows and bright lights and flashes of blue and yellow and red as deep as the red of my blood. They move toward me and they scream at me and I don't know what they are, but I know they're helping the bugs. They're screaming. I start shaking, 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 shaking. My entire body is shaking and my heart is racing and I can see it pounding through my chest and I'm sweating and it stings. The bugs crawl onto my skin and they start biting me and I try to kill them. I claw at my skin, tear at my hair, start biting myself. I don't have any fucking teeth and I'm biting myself and there's shadows and bright lights and flashes and screams and bugs, bugs, bugs. I'm lost. Completely fucking lost. I scream. I piss on myself. I shit my pants. The nurse returns and she calls for help and men in white come and they put me on a bed and they hold me there. I try to kill the bugs, but I can't move, so they live in me and on me. I feel the stethoscope and the gauge, and they stick a needle in my arm, and they hold me down. I'm blinded by blackness. I'm gone. That's that.
Hi.
Hi.
when I sat there, I wondered what happens to a man who reads about himself after 10 years. I mean, it wasn't a very optimistic piece.
No, it's definitely not an optimistic piece. I mean, as I read this stuff now, it's hard to connect myself to it anymore. You know, it's like I can read it and I can separate myself from the events of it and the writing of it. So I just sort of, I don't actually really think about it when I read it. I just read it.
Yeah. When I had finished the book, the first thing that,
Oh, thank you.
if you want to smoke,
Okay, thank you.
feel free.
Okay.
The first thing I wondered after having read the book is, how's the guy doing now? Because you were taken to the center and you got out sober, but that's when the real work starts, you know. Could you describe those first 3 months after leaving the center?
The first 3 months, I don't know how many of you read the book, but after I was in this treatment facility where I was for a few months, I got out and I immediately had to go to jail. So I was incarcerated for the next 4 months. So being incarcerated is actually pretty easy to stay clean.
Mm-hmm. But after that? Yeah.
After that, but I mean, after that it was difficult. You know, I got out of jail and my girlfriend committed suicide and life sucked, you know. It was shitty. There was nothing good. So I just tried to survive. I borrowed a bunch of dough from a friend of mine and I found a place to live and I just got a shitty job and I just, you know, worried about surviving, worried about making it through the day, worried about making enough dough to pay my bills and get some food and some cigarettes. And it sucked for a couple of years, you know. I had done enough damage to my body that I didn't feel physically well for 2 years probably, and I was sick for maybe at least a year, you know, still vomiting pretty frequently and you know, dealing with things like bloody noses and hawking up all kinds of shit from my lungs. And the physical part of it's never that bad, actually. I mean, it's painful, but it's not bad compared to the rest of it, the emotional stuff, you know, like when my girlfriend committed suicide, it was just like, what the fuck am I gonna do, you know? It's just like, do whatever I need to do to get to the next minute.
I mean, any person at that particular moment would have gone to a bar and would have drunk himself blind.
Yeah, I mean,
wasn't that the only option at that moment?
That was certainly a thought. That was a thought that went through my head very frequently. Again, for those of you who don't know, who haven't read the book, I met a girl at this facility and fell in love with her, and she fell in love with me, and she was troubled, as troubled as I was, certainly. And when I got out, she was still there, and then she got out while I was incarcerated, and then she committed suicide while I was incarcerated. And yeah, I wanted to drink, but I had also been told that if I started drinking again, I would die. You know, my body was fucked up enough that if I started using again, I knew I would, you know, I don't know if I would die if I took one drink, but if I went on a bender for any period of time at all, there was a good chance that I would have died, and I just didn't want to die, and that was the simple option for me. It was, you know, be miserable with the hope that maybe shit gets better, or die, and I chose to be miserable with the hope that shit would get better. Yeah. And it has. It did.
At a certain moment, there must have been the idea for writing this book sprouted more or less in your mind. Can you remember when this happened? Was it when you were so miserable that you had to look for?
No, I
Sort
mean,
of
I
lifeline.
didn't think about writing a book for a long time, you know, like the first 2 years, it was just think about getting through the day, thinking about getting some dough to pay my rent, and there was no thought of any sort of future. There was no thought of what am I going to do with my life when I grow up. There was none of that shit. It was just like, okay, I got a deal, and maybe at some point I'll have ideas of what I want to do. After about a year of being clean, I stopped working shitty jobs, and I went to work for a friend of mine who's in this book who was a gangster, which was good work because I didn't really have to do anything and I got paid a lot of money. It's the best job I ever had. You know, I would get a call and it'd be like, go to St. Louis and pick up a car at this address and drive it to Indianapolis and call me when you're done. And I would get a big wad of cash.
You didn't look in the trunk?
Never. I didn't ever look at anything. And I drove the speed limit, or 2 miles above it. So then when I had an opportunity to start thinking about what I wanted to do, I had to start considering a bunch of things. One of them is what did I like, and I like to read a lot. The other one was that I was in many ways completely unemployable. People who employ other people in good jobs don't rush out looking for people like me to come work for them. My resume, it was sort of the first time I had a girlfriend after the events of this book. I was dating this girl from a very wealthy family in Chicago, and the first time I met her parents is we went out to their big giant house, and they were like, so James, what do you do? And I was like, oh, I work in a bar. And they were like, well, what did you do before that? And I was like, oh, I was in jail. And what did you do before that? I was in drug treatment. And what did you do before that? I sold crack. And it was like the worst fucking resume in the history of the world. So there was no way I was getting a real job. And so I had to think about what I could do that I might enjoy and that I might be able to make a living at. And I decided I wanted to try to be a writer. And so, in my free time I wrote. Eventually I stopped working for my friend because I felt uncomfortable with some of the things I was doing. I got a gun pulled on me, like put in my face, and that scared the shit out of me. And I had that happen to me in my previous life, but the whole point of getting better was so that motherfuckers didn't point guns at me anymore. So I quit, and I just tried to be a writer. And eventually, it wasn't like I want to write this book. It was just like figure out what I can write or if I can do it at all. And I started the book like 7 years after the events that take place in it. And I wrote it first because I thought it would be the best first book I had. I wanted to, I think a writer's first book can be very important. And it can either put you way ahead of the game or in some instances hurt you or do nothing. But a lot of the writers that I admired most had written first books that got a lot of attention. And I knew that if I wrote this book the way I thought I could, that it would do that for me. And that's why, that was one of the reasons I did it.
Were there ever any doubts about the subject? Because it could be, I would have found it embarrassing to tell this about myself, and there's other people involved, like your parents, the friends you met at the facility.
No, there were no worries. I knew if I treated people honestly that they didn't have anything to complain about. One thing about most of the people in the facility is most of the people I knew in the facility are now dead, so they can't really complain.
It would be hard. Yeah.
But my parents are pretty cool. Most of my friends are pretty cool, and I knew that if I was just honest with them, if I painted honest portrayals of them in the book, that they couldn't complain about anything. And I knew that as long as I was honest with myself and honest of my portrayal of myself in the book, they certainly couldn't complain about anything, because I come off as much worse than certainly any of them. And so no, I wasn't embarrassed about it, you know. I'd never seen and I wasn't embarrassed like moving into that genre of it, you know. Like I think about addiction books and I think most of them are kind of stupid and corny and ridiculous, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to write it. You know, I'd never seen a book about addiction that I thought was the real thing, that I thought portrayed it honestly or truthfully or in a way that was in touch with the reality of it, you know. Like in America there's this show called Behind the Music. It's like on this network VH1, and it's all documentaries about rock stars, and they're always sort of like talking about their drug addictions and how cool they were. And, you know, oh, I played the show in Tampa, and then I went backstage and drank some Jack Daniels and snorted a bunch of blow, and eventually, you know, I woke up on the floor of the Four Seasons and I knew I had to stop. And shit wasn't like that for me. And it wasn't like that for anybody else I knew. No drug addict I know wakes up on the floor of the fucking Four Seasons, you know? You wake up in the alley and you're covered with vomit and you pissed in your pants, and it ain't glamorous, and it
No
ain't
romance
cool,
there.
and it's not romantic. And so I wanted to write a book that sort of, you know, demystified it. And
You just said your parents were cool about it. I mean, when I think about it, there's always the where did we go wrong question, you know. How did you handle that with them?
You know, I don't blame my parents for anything I did in my life. My parents are cool people, and they loved me, and they did the best they could with me. And my parents never forced me to pick up a bottle or pick up a pipe or raise my fist in anger or break the law or do any of that shit. I did that. And I knew I was doing it when I did it, and I knew it was wrong when I did it. And I don't think, it always annoys me, like in America now there's this whole sort of trend of victimology where people never want to take responsibility for their own actions. And they say, oh, I did this and this, but it's not my fault. You know, my mom didn't hug me enough, or you know, my teacher whacked me with a ruler, or whatever the fuck it is. And I think it's bullshit, you know. People make decisions that determine the course of their life, and I did that. And there was no blame for anyone but myself. And there never has been.
No. But they never wondered if there had been mistakes.
Sure, they wondered if they were if they had caused this whole mess somehow. Every parent wonders what went wrong if you have a troubled child. But in my case, nothing went wrong. I was just a troubled kid. I had this shit inside of me that I didn't know how to deal with. And the way I learned to deal with it was drink, get high, and get in trouble.
Yeah.
And hurt myself.
Could you describe, because maybe people don't know the social circumstances you lived in with your parents?
I mean, I grew up in an upper middle class American environment. My dad was a very successful businessman. You know, like he lived in Eindhoven for a while in the 80s. He was the CEO of a company in America called Whirlpool, which is a giant dishwasher factory. And in the a dishwasher company and refrigerators and ovens. And so in the late 80s, you know, he came over to Eindhoven and he bought all of Philips' appliance divisions for Whirlpool and then integrated them into that company. And I grew up in a very privileged, in certain ways, sheltered environment. So it wasn't like I had, you know, grown up in some ghetto somewhere or had grown up in a way that I was lacking anything. That's my social circumstances, but it didn't make a difference. You know, it's like when you meet drug addicts and alcoholics, it's not like they come from one part of society. You know, it's an equal opportunity affliction. I know as many rich drug addicts as I know poor drug addicts, and I know as many middle-class drug addicts as I know rich or poor drug addicts. I mean, the condition cuts across socioeconomic, racial, religious boundaries. There's no... Being wealthy didn't have anything to do with it.
Has it something to do with growing up in America today, in general, or growing up in the West?
I don't know. I mean, Europeans always ask me that. Are American children more troubled than ours? And they always want me to say yes.
I don't want you to say anything.
I don't know. You know, I don't know enough about what it's like to live here as a kid to know. But I know that in Western Europe and America, the ratios of alcoholics to population, or the percentage of any given population that is addicted to something, is roughly the same. So I don't know if I don't think it's a uniquely American experience.
No, but I didn't mean a specific American, but more these times, you know, with all, we're having a good life more or less, and there are many diversions and there are many freedoms if you compare that to the 50s, for instance. You can do anything you want. You can find anything you want on the internet.
Yeah, I mean,
you can buy anything in the streets.
It's probably a whole lot easier to get drugs now than it was then. It's pretty easy to get drugs wherever you are. I mean, I don't need to say that I could walk out the door right now and find drugs. Everybody in here knows that. But I could walk out the door of pretty much any country in the Western world and find drugs pretty quickly. And maybe that's a condition of the time we live in. I think people are bored. I think people, maybe in past times, people had sort of the church to fill what might be a void that they feel, and as our societies become more secular, they look for things to fill that void, and I think that void is different in different people, and some people look to drugs and alcohol to fill that void, or to deal with feelings that they have that they might not understand.
As a former addict, one would presume that you would condemn Holland and Amsterdam for being so liberal about drugs.
Actually, absolutely not. I'm not anti-drug at all. I'm not anti-alcohol at all. I don't think that because I can't use them, other people can't use them. You know, I think if people can use chemicals responsibly, that they should, and they should enjoy them. They should be careful, and they should be aware, but if you can go out and smoke weed and it doesn't lead you elsewhere, then go smoke your weed and have fun. Or if you can have a cocktail at night and not want to drink 20 of them, enjoy your cocktail. So no, I actually in a lot of ways think Holland's drug policy is really reasonable and humane. American drug policy doesn't stop drugs from coming into the country, and it's not like, I mean, I could get weed almost as easily in New York City as I can in Holland, and prohibition hasn't prevented that at all.
Have you been here more or less shied away from the shops?
Since I've been here?
Yeah.
No, I did. I went to a couple of them last night. That might sound ridiculous. One I went to because my brother-in-law wanted a T-shirt from the Bulldog, so I went there to buy him a T-shirt, and then I just sort of like walked in there and looked around and like watched people do what they do in there, and it's sometimes interesting to look at situations I used to be in from this side of it. It's interesting to watch people behave in ways I used to behave, and I don't judge them or condemn them for it. It's just what they do.
Yeah. You called your story a memoir and not a novel. Have you ever considered taking the manuscript to a publisher, calling it a novel, because it's so much easier to hide behind fictional characters? than putting yourself up front?
I don't really actually call it anything. I just call it a book. I don't care what people call it. They can call it a
The publisher calls it a memoir.
The publisher calls it a memoir. When we sold it, we initially sold it, when it went out to publishers initially, it went out as fiction. And it went out as fiction because a lot of the writers that I like, and a lot of the writers especially the course of the 20th century, wrote about their lives. You know, people like Celine or Henry Miller or F. Scott Fitzgerald or Ernest Hemingway or Jack Kerouac or Charles Bukowski or Brett Ellis. All these people were writers who wrote about their lives, and in many cases they literally just changed the name of the lead character from whatever their name was to the lead character's name. And we wanted the book to be published in sort of the tradition of those writers, and hoped that it would be considered alongside some of those writers' books. When the publisher bought it and they started talking to the marketing department about it, they were like, well, it will sell a lot more copies if we sell it as nonfiction. And I was fine with that. The book had to go through a long and complicated process of legal verification. So I didn't really at that point I didn't give a shit what it came out as, and I just assumed that if it's a good enough book, it'll be read in 50 years, and if it's not a good enough book, it won't, and regardless of what section of the bookstore it's put in.
You had never written, so you had to teach yourself more or less the trade. Can you describe, if we had walked into your study about a couple of years ago and you were going at it, what it looked like, what it sounded like?
I know you know what it looks like because you read an essay I wrote about it. But I taught myself how to write. I didn't go to school for it. I'm not, I haven't ever been to a writing workshop. I don't do any of that shit. A couple things that might seem unusual, but one of the things is I talk to myself the whole time. I talk through what I'm writing. So I think that the spoken word is very different from the written word, and I would rather have my book read as if it were something that's spoken. So as I write it, I speak everything, because I think speaking has a different rhythm to it than formal writing does, and that's the rhythm that I want, because I think it's more natural and it communicates things easier and better. So I talk everything out, and there's nothing in the book that I wouldn't actually say that you might not hear come from my mouth. The other thing I do when I write is I listen to music constantly. I'm one of those horrible music pirates who has a gigantic library of music on his computer, and I play it constantly while I work. And what I do is I listen to music that makes me feel however I'm trying to feel in the book. So if I'm angry in the book, I listen to angry music. I listen to like punk or heavy metal. Or when I'm sad in the book, I listen to like opera or cheesy love songs. And I use music to manipulate my mood. And sometimes I get a little bit too excited about the music, so I get up and I dance around, or I throw shit, or sometimes I cry. I know things are going well if I'm feeling deeply as I'm working. So.
Yeah.
And I have 2 big dogs that sit with me while I work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they helpful?
Yeah, they are. They are. I talk to them, hang out with them. We go for walks.
The next part of this question would have been, but you've already answered it. If I had to write my story, if it had been that story, I would have cried over each and every page.
I didn't cry over each and every page. I cried a couple times. I cried, like I said earlier, and if you've read the book, a lot of the people in there are no longer with us, or some of them that are with us are incarcerated for the rest of their lives. And one of the hardest things about writing the book was sort of living with them again. and being with them as I wrote about them. It was really fucking depressing, you know, especially a couple of them who I really loved. And that bummed me out, and it still bums me out. It bums me out even talking about it. And then when I finished the book, when I wrote the last word of it, I lived in Los Angeles, and I wrote the last word, and I sort of looked at it, and then I just burst into tears, wept like a little baby for like 45 minutes. So yeah, I'm not scared of feeling things. I'm not scared of allowing myself to feel, even if it makes me look weak or vulnerable. I think there's great strength in weakness and in vulnerability.
Yeah. What impressed me is the kind of friendship you describe that went on. Let's call it on the inside. What is the difference between friendship on the inside from friendship on the outside when you're free?
If any of you have ever been in a treatment facility, the friends you make there are these. At least the treatment facility I was in, there were a bunch of fucking crazy people there, because nobody ends up in one of those places because they're healthy or because they're sane or because their life is good. So you end up being in there with a bunch of crazy people. And I personally like crazy people. But you form these very intense bonds with people, and I think they are different in certain ways than normal friendships, because, you know, in many ways when you're there, you're fighting for your life, or you're figuring out if you can have a life, or if you even want a life. And one of the ways you answer all those questions is through your interactions with other people, and those other people support you and help you think about things and help you feel things and learn things, and in that process you bond with them very intensely. And, you know, like, the one character from the book who's still healthy is a judge, and I don't see him that often, but I do still see him. And, you know, I saw him about 3 weeks ago in New York, and I hadn't seen him for a couple of years, but, you know, I see him, and he's still, it's just different than anything else. He's still like my closest friend, even more so than people I may have known my entire life.
Yeah. The story, the way you wrote it down, isn't just a story. You seem to have invented a style which I just call the cut the bullshit style.
Yeah.
How did you go for it?
I write very differently than anyone else I've ever seen. I mean, I did it very deliberately. One thing, when I wanted to become a writer, I didn't want to just be another guy who could write. You know, there are plenty of guys out there who can just write, who can write very well and very capably. But as I look back across the books I read that I liked the most, they were usually books that when they appeared, no one had ever seen anything like them before. You know, when Celine wrote his first book, nobody had seen anything like that. Or when Hemingway did it, or when Fitzgerald or Henry Miller or any of those people. Most great books that are read over long periods of time are books that broke a lot of rules and went into directions that nobody had ever thought of going or had gone. So I wanted to figure out or find a voice that wasn't like anyone else's voice, that when somebody picks up that book or any book I might write in the future, they can look at two sentences of it and say, that's James Frey. Nobody else can do it like that. And so that I was thinking about that. Then I was also thinking about what I was saying before about oral communication and about how I think. And I don't speak with punctuation marks, and I don't speak with commas, and I don't speak with quotation marks, and I don't think with any of those things. So I decided that in many cases they were irrelevant. As I sit here and speak, I don't say, I am going to say, and then say something. I just fucking say it. So I got rid of he said, she said, anything like that, any quotation mark, any of that crap, just gone. And a lot of times in order to express interior thought, our thoughts are stream of consciousness, and other people have certainly done this before me, but I just take phrases that, as they would pop into my head, and I just string them together, because I don't think as I sit here, there is a group of people in front of me, period. They are sitting in chairs, period. They are from Holland, period. I think just a quick blister of thoughts that are quick little words and phrases that match up. So I did that. And then another thing, very specifically to this book, is I wanted people, as they read the book, to feel something similar to what addiction is, or something that is as close to addiction in words, in that you would be revolted, you would feel awful, you would feel a sense of urgency and speed, and you would not be able to stop even if you wanted to. And again, to do that, I knew the thing had to move very, very quickly, so I eliminated paragraph indentations and left-faced everything, so it just goes straight down a page. And I took away punctuation marks because those just slow everything down. And it's sort of just a combination of thinking about a bunch of different things that and over a long period of time of working and trying different things that led me to write the way that I write.
Also, it seems to be a very much here and now kind of story. No flashbacks, no...
No, yeah. I mean, I wanted to walk you through the process of this experience as I went through it. I wanted you to feel it as I felt it, and to do that, it had to be in the first person, present, in the immediate, in the moment as I felt the moment.
Yeah. Wanting to be a original voice that anyone reading just a few sentences would recognize is a very high standard that you set yourself.
Sure. Maybe I set a high standard for myself, but so what? That's cool. I mean, I'm not scared of high standards, and I absolutely set a high standard, and I hope I still, I hope I met it, and I hope I continue to.
We just talked about the article in the New York Observer, which quotes you that you want to be the best writer of your generation, and you were more or less trashing Dave Eggers, who wrote a staggering story, a heartbreaking story of staggering genius, and you were more or less a bit pissed off that he had won that title of the best writer of his generation.
I mean, yeah, in 50 years, I want to be remembered as the greatest writer, the greatest American male writer of my time. Absolutely. I have no problem saying that. I have no problem admitting to that ambition. I have no desire to grow up to be a mid-list writer. I have no desire to grow up to have people read my books and say, oh, that was okay. It was all right. I have no desire to sell, 1,000 copies. I want to establish myself in the canon of literature, and I want to be placed on a pedestal along with the people I've mentioned, and some other people who are working today and who've worked in the past. And a reporter asked me about a year ago what I thought of Eggers, because at the time Eggers was the guy who was considered that. Him and I are exactly the same age. I think we were born a month apart. Pre-publication, we were being compared in certain ways because of our age, and because we both wrote books about ourselves and about our lives, and because those books both have ended up getting a certain amount of attention in America. And the reporter asked me a question, and I gave him an honest answer, just like when anybody in this room asks me a question, I'm going to give you an honest answer. And you may not like it, but that's not for me to worry about. Just like, what really what I really think is that I don't care what Dave Eggers does, just like I don't care what any other writer does, because it's not a game like soccer or football where we're in direct competition with each other. If I worry about myself and I worry about my work, everything that I want will take care of itself, and neither he nor anyone else except myself can do anything about it.
Yeah. Have you, in your mind, any idea, you say the best writer of a generation, what should a writer of this generation write about? I mean, in the days of Charles Dickens, for instance, the writer was the entertainer. He went on tours, he published his stories, his novels daily in newspapers, so people read it like a sort of soap opera. It was entertainment. Now we've got entertainment. We're being smothered to death by entertainment. So why write?
Because I think you can still touch people with books. I think there's still, people still buy a lot of books. People still read. Thankfully, despite the fact that there are a lot of competing forms of entertainment, books are still around and books are still read, and I think they'll continue to be. The written word isn't going to disappear. It might, at some point, it may change form. We may switch to some sort of e-book or something, but that's not happening now. And I think if you write something that's good enough and affects people enough, they'll read it, and it'll cut through the sort of swarm of the rest of the shit. My only responsibility, I feel, as a writer is to tell honest stories and to be honest with myself, and then what I hope is that my work can, change the way people think, and change the way people feel, change the way people live their lives, and change the way people write, because that's what the books that I love have done for me and done for a lot of other people.
Is it a mission?
You can call it a mission, you can call it an ambition, you can call it a goal, you can call it whatever you want. It's what I want to do, it's what I hope to do, it's what I think I can do, it's what I believe, I know I can do. It's what, if I have enough time, I think I will do. And I think this is the first step towards it.
Yep. You just said as a writer you didn't want to sound like anybody else, so that suggests that you know about the other guys.
Yeah, I know about the other guys.
Yeah.
I read them all.
Yeah.
What do you want me to say more than that? I read a lot. I read for a couple hours a day, I think.
Is that a critical reading?
No.
Just checking the competition?
I read because I like to read. And I read because I think it's important for me to see what other people are doing. I think it's important to see what other writers of my time are writing about and how they're doing it. A lot of them I think are really good. I think there are a lot of great writers out there. I think there are a lot of great writers who haven't gotten as much attention as some of us have. I think Jhumpa Lahiri, who was here last month, I guess, is an amazingly talented writer who I admire a lot. But in certain ways, she's not who I'm stacked up against. I mean, there are a few writers, both male and female, both American and European and otherwise, who emerge from every generation. And I would like it if she and I ended up being read in 50 years. But yeah, I read a lot because I like it, because I dig it, because it's what I do.
Yeah.
But I don't read Jonathan Safran Foer, who was here a couple months ago, and criticize, pick it apart the way books critics do. I mean, I either like it or I don't, and that's the way it is. And I actually like his book too.
Yeah. Your own book. It could be read like a sort of criticizing American society for letting this happen to people. And next question would be, would you ever consider writing a more straightforward political novel?
I don't know I don't know. I mean, I'm not, I try to avoid politics, at least publicly, you know. Since I've been here, a couple of reporters have been like, so what do you think about the war in Iraq? My simple response is, I'm not here to talk about politics. I'm a writer. I'm not a politician or a soldier. I think I try to write about things that are important to me, and politics aren't necessarily that important to me. I mean, I do my duty as a citizen and try to participate in certain ways, but I'm not a politician. You know, I think I'll write about other things. The next book I'm writing is a book about one of the characters in this book. If you've read it, the next book is called My Friend Leonard. He's a gangster guy who is a pal of mine. And after that, I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to take a year off, and my wife and I are going to try to have a kid. And then after that, we'll see. We'll see, but I'm not worried about it. I know I feel, you know, as I walk around, I feel books that are in me. You know, I walked around with this book for a while, and I feel like there are 4 or 5 in me, at least right now.
Talking about kids, isn't it frightening to have a kid of your own, thinking about what will happen to you and to the guys in the facility?
We're going to some American scientists and trying to use genetic engineering so that our children receive all of my wife's genes and none of mine.
That's not what I meant.
No, I mean, yeah, people always ask me that. What are you going to do if your kids turn out to be like you? I hope they don't. And if they do, I'll do what my parents did with me, which is they loved me and they did the best they could for me, and they offered me help when I was ready to take it. And I think that's all you can do, you know. I think when we have children, hopefully we do, when the children are old enough, I'll give them this book and I'll say, read this. This is what happened to your pop. You should maybe try to learn from it so that it doesn't happen to you. And hopefully that works.
Yeah.
My wife's a lot better looking than I am, too. So that's another reason we hope that they get her genes.
Okay, maybe the moment has come that maybe some people in the audience want to ask some questions to James about the book. There's a gentleman over there. Yeah.
He asked if I have any insights into the root of my addiction. I mean, different people have different theories about it. I had one of my some people think that I was a genetic cocktail destined for disaster because one of my grandfathers was an alcoholic and the other is a convicted felon. And I happen to be the perfect combination of those things. So maybe genetics had something to do with it. Another theory that my parents are proponents of is when I was born with really bad ear infections, so I'm half deaf right now. And as a child, I cried a lot. I screamed constantly as an infant, and up until the time I was about 2 years old. And you know, throughout those couple of years, my parents would take me to these doctors and they'd say, our kid fucking screams all the time. There's something wrong with him. And this one pediatrician that they had said, he's fine. I can't find anything wrong with him. And then so they switched pediatricians, and when I was like just under 2, this pediatrician said, your son has really bad ear infections and they're eating away his eardrums and he's screaming because he's in pain. So one theory is that as I was an infant, I was feeling all this pain. Nobody was able to do anything to make it stop, and it ignited some form of resentment and rage. And maybe, I think there's validity to both those things, and maybe some combination of things. But in a lot of ways, I also don't think it matters that much. You know, like I said before, nobody made me do the things I did. When I picked up a bottle, I knew I was doing it. When I picked up a pipe, I knew I was doing it. When I was breaking the law, I knew I was fucking doing it, and I did it anyway. And to me, it doesn't have anything to do with genetics, and it didn't have anything to do with childhood ear infections. It had to do with my inability to control myself. And where did that come from? Maybe those things, but for me to get better, it didn't matter. It just mattered that I had to figure out how to stop and how to change and how to make different types of decisions. And I had to take responsibility for everything that I had done to myself and to other people. And I didn't want to pass that responsibility off to genetics or ear infections or anything else. Through financially, through some of it, and then eventually no. I mean, for the last couple of years of it, I sold drugs, and you know, you buy drugs in bulk, and then you sell enough to buy more, and you keep the leftover for yourself, and that's what I did. But through some of it, yeah, they did. And I took great advantage of them and lied to them and took as much as I could from them. And it sucks to admit that, but that's what I did. They stopped when I was like 20. That's it. I'm all done. No, I wasn't one of those kids that was like, who could write when I was little. I wasn't one of the stars of the classroom or ever anything even close. I mean, I was talking with a friend of mine about this. You know, a good friend of mine when he was like 18, 19, 20, 21. I have a couple good friends. One always dreamed of being a writer, and he's incredibly well read, and he is incredibly smart and incredibly gifted, very naturally talented. But the thing about it was and another friend of mine published a novel when he was 23 that was published to great critical acclaim, but was never able to write anything ever again. And I think the great advantage I have over many, many other people is I have a sense of discipline, which I developed through having to quit drinking and doing drugs, so that I can sit in front of a computer and work for a lot longer than anybody else can. And I can sit there for 10, 12, 14, 16 hours straight and work, and most people can't do that. And the only reason I get published and get to come do shit like this now is because I can do that, not because I'm any more intelligent or any more gifted than anyone else. So I guess to answer your question, no, I never got A's on my... Did I get pleasure? No, I got no pleasure out of schoolwork ever. Who worked there or who was a patient? Yeah. I mean, there were... they had trouble giving me that come on. I mean, I went into the place and I was horribly resistant to treatment. In America, as in most places, the only treatment that is offered to people is 12-step and AA-based methods of rehabilitation, and I didn't ever believe in or use that. So most of the people there were very frustrated with me because they'd say, well, James, it's time for you to work on step number 3. And I'd be like, yeah. But yeah, there were a couple people who I bonded with who helped me an enormous amount. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't think you can make it through an experience like this without having a couple people who help you in that way.
Was your resistance to the 12-step program? Because the 12-step program is a religious thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's based, you need to have a belief in God or some form of higher power for that to work and to be able to...
That was absent with you.
Yeah, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in a higher power, I don't believe in any of that stuff. And I did believe a system based in that type of belief would work for me, and I still don't believe in any of that stuff.
The thing that helped you through, as I just told, was the little book about the Tao. Could you tell people something about what that little book did for you?
My brother used to bring me books while I was in rehab because it was a way to keep myself occupied and because I like to read. And one of the books he brought me is this little book called the Tao The Ching, which is a book of Chinese philosophy that's thousands and thousands of years old, and large parts of Buddhism and Hinduism are based on this book. And I read it and it helped me, you know. It just helped me because it's not a religion, and it doesn't have rules. It just helped me to think about things a specific way, and it can teach one how to be patient and to live and think simply and to have compassion for yourself and for other people, and those were all things I needed to learn. And so, yeah, I mean, I used that book as much as I could.
Did you throw it out when you left the facility, or is it still important to you?
No, I still use it. Like I have Taoist tattoos on myself, and among others, and you know that I have on my wrist here. You probably can't see it, but like on my wrist here, it says SPCDHC, and it stands for simplicity, patience, compassion, discipline, honesty, courage. And it's like those are words that are for the most part Taoist words, and for me they're important words, and so I tattoo them onto my body and onto my wrist because I see them all the time, and it reminds me that those are things that I want. Those are words that I want to use as sort of governing principles of my life. So the Tao just helped me learn to live and think certain ways. People use the word spirituality, and I don't really have any idea what that means. I don't feel spiritual. I don't feel like there's any sort of spirit. I mean, I feel human. I mean, if the human spirit is part of spirituality, then I guess, but I don't ever consider myself particularly spiritual. I actually consider myself sort of absolutely the opposite. I consider myself very matter of fact and very realistic about what my life has been and is, and how I feel I need to live it, and what the circumstances of it are. No, I was young. I was like, I have memories of drinking when I was like 7, 8, 9, 10. The first time I got bombed, I was 10. You know, you're a kid, or at least when I was a kid, you know, I had these parents who were very social people. So they have parties, and they take you to parties with all the other parents' kids, and I would watch people drink. I would watch adults drink. And something I noticed at a very young age is when people took drink, they always seemed to be happier. They would have this drink, and then they would be happy. And so I thought, maybe if I have that drink, I'll be happy. And so I tried to start trying to sneak it and, you know, steal little sips of glasses of wine, or, you know, I'd go to a football game with my dad, and I'd be like, Dad, give me a sip of your beer, give me a sip of your beer, come on, Dad, give me a sip of your beer. And then one night my parents were just out, and I was like 10, and I had some old babysitter who fell asleep. I was like, all right, I'm going to go see what I can do. And I snuck in, I took opened their liquor cabinet, and I took a big slug of bourbon. And, you know, I shuddered, and like, and it hurt, and it burned, and it was sort of disgusting. And then a couple minutes later, it felt good. And I was like, yeah, I found it. I mean, you talk to a lot of people who end up in circumstances similar to the ones I was in, and a lot of us start early. It's not particularly, it's not that, I mean, it's not common, it's not normal, but it's not that uncommon, and it's not that extraordinary. I mean, I know a number of other people who started that young. I mean, I don't generally go and give speeches about rehabilitation or anything like it, but one thing I do occasionally do is go talk to kids if they are troubled. So I spent part of last week in the youth correctional facilities in the states of New Hampshire and Maine in the United States. I went to youth prisons and hung out with drug offenders and violent drug offenders. Like, I was with some kid who told me his mom made him start smoking crack with her when he was 8. You know, that shit happens. And a lot of the kids who were in there were like, yeah, I started drinking when I was 9, or smoking weed when I was 11, or, you know, that's where a lot of troubled kids find themselves, is entering into that sort of world at a young age. Yeah, I did. I mean, I finished high school with a 2.1 grade point average, and then I took, you know, in America we have these placement tests, they're called SATs, and I got very, very high scores on them, which was what got me into college. That and recommendation letters got me into college, and then college in America is actually pretty easy. You can arrange your schedule so you never have to go to class before noon. And it's like, I could go out and get as fucked up as I wanted to, and I could always get up by noon. And then in a lot of colleges, it's like, if you just show up to every class, a teacher won't fail you. They might give you a D, but they won't fail you as long as you're there. And that was just my policy, just show up. Set my schedule as late as I possibly could, and then just show up. So... I haven't been close in many, many, many years. I mean, there were periods of time for a couple of years after, like I was saying, where I was sort of constantly on the verge of a relapse, and it was a constant struggle, and it was very difficult at times, and it was always uncomfortable. But it's like, you know, practice makes perfect. You just get used to it, and you get better at dealing with it, and you understand it more, and you feel better, and I mean, I still have very, very occasional urges. Usually, they always come when I have an extreme emotion in one way or the other. When I'm really upset, or when I'm really angry, or when I'm really happy, it's always like, ooh, let's go get bombed. But it's an easy thing to avoid, and it's an easy thing to deal with. I usually just talk to them, you know, like the thing with those kids is they're used to having people come in and be like, you're bad, you gotta stop doing what you're doing, and treating them like idiots, and treating them like they're fools. And I just go in and I'm like, what up? You know, I've been where you've been. I've done the same shit you've done. I've been locked up the same way you're locked up now. And I can tell you that if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to end up worse. And you're going to end up in a place that's not going to be very pleasant for you. And you're going to end up in a place that isn't very cool. And if you can't stop, I always say to them, there are three career paths for drug addicts. There is death. There is, in America at least, there is death, there is permanent incarceration, or there is sobriety. And that they should think about their incarceration as an opportunity to get better. And then I just listen to them, A lot of those kids, they don't have anybody who just listen to them, or who will. As you may notice, I use profanity in my sort of my normal vernacular. And in a lot of ways, I still feel like I'm a troubled 18-year-old kid. So that's a lot of what I say to them. What the most important thing with those kids is that a lot of them still have sort of the romantic notions of, yeah, I'm a thug, motherfucker. I can, sling rock and do whatever. And it's like, yeah, you can, but you're going to fucking hurt yourself if you keep doing it, because I've done it, and you're a fucking fool if you keep going. And they respect that generally.
There also was a publisher who wanted to do a series of books with you, more or less Kick the Habit with James, sort of series, but you refused.
Yeah, there was a publisher who wanted to publish a series of self-help books, like the James Frey self-help series. I was like, fuck that. I was like, I'm not a guru or a teacher or anything more than a writer who wrote a book about drug addiction, and whatever I have to say about the topic is in the book, and whatever anybody has to learn from me about it is in the book, and I don't feel like I want to have a life that's based. One of the hardest parts about this book is I didn't go around talking about all this stuff for many years. It wasn't like I would meet you and be like, hey, I'm James, and I used to have drug problems. Just be like, yeah, I don't drink. They'd be like, why? And I just say, I don't. And now I have to talk about it all the time, and I'm honestly looking forward to a point somewhere down the road where I don't have to talk about it so much, because it's not always very comfortable or pleasant to do.
One more question, I think. Two?
Well, my question is, do you have a feeling of time lost, not having an happy use? And are you taking, or are you now trying to make up for it? Or on the other hand, is it an inspiration having that sort of use and history and addictions and whatever?
I mean, in a lot of ways, I think I've been lucky. I mean, I feel like I'm lucky to be here, and I feel like I'm lucky to have had a bunch of people who cared enough about me to help me get better, and I wouldn't trade the experiences I've had for anyone else's, and I don't wish I hadn't had them. I wouldn't wish them on other people, and if I had a choice, I probably wouldn't go through that process again, but I did, and it's cool, and I'm glad it happened. It's like everyone in here is who they are because of the experiences they've had, and my experiences have made my life what it is today, and what it is today is something that's pretty cool, and something that I'm pretty happy with, and something that I'm comfortable with and I enjoy. And so if what I had to go through is what had to happen for me to be where I am now, that's cool. And I'm happy to answer as many questions as you guys have, so don't worry about being the last question. I mean, yeah, I never say it's easy. It was really hard, and I was really miserable for a really long time. And like I was saying, I wasn't comfortable for a couple of years. I never felt normal or okay or happy, because I didn't want to die, and that was the simple thing always. and it became even more evident after I got out of the facility, and I watched people I know die, and I watched other people I know get locked up for I have a friend who's in Angola State Prison in Louisiana, which is probably the worst prison in America. It's a nasty, fucking horrible place, and he's there for the rest of his life, no chance of parole, and he went in when he was 29. And that could happen to me. I have another friend who's at San Quentin in California, which is another very, very unpleasant place for the rest of his life. No chance of parole ever. Drug offenses. I mean, they were both actually victims of three strike. In America, in certain states, if you commit 3 separate felonies and 3 separate incidences, you go to jail for the rest of your life. No chance of parole. I knew another guy who went in Michigan. Michigan has some of the strictest drug laws in the United States, and if you get caught with more than 5 grams of cocaine in any form, you get life, no parole. So I knew a 23-year-old kid who had like 5.5 grams of coke, which is about 28 grams is an ounce. So a fifth of an ounce of cocaine. And he went to jail for the rest of his life. No chance of ever getting out. And then I saw a bunch of other people I know die. A friend of mine got shot outside a crack house, got his head blown off. Another friend got beaten to death outside of a bar. And the choices were that, or just be really miserable and uncomfortable for a while, with the hope that maybe it would get better. And that was, honestly, a pretty easy decision to make most of the time. I mean, one of the things I hope with this book is I hope no one here in this room can pick this book up and read it straight through. That no one can pick it up and read it and not at some point have to close it and say, my God, I can't keep going. Or at some point have to set it down and cry. Or at some point have to say, this guy's a fucking asshole, I can't take him anymore. I wanted to make people feel what I felt while I was going through the experience of it, which were very strong feelings. And in order to write those feelings realistically and effectively, I had to feel some semblance of them while I was doing it. And in order to feel some semblance of of them, I had to figure out ways to sort of initiate them. And the best way I knew was music and sort of movement, or there's a scene in the book. One of the things I used to do, which also isn't uncommon, is I would hurt myself when I felt really bad and I didn't have substances immediately available. What I would do is I would tear off one of the toenails on my left foot, tear the thing off. And so while I was writing about this in the book, 7 years after I had stopped doing it, I tore my fucking toenail off so that I felt that pain, so that I could write effectively about that pain, because that was one of the whole things one of the whole intentions of the book was I had never read a book about these things that I felt was realistic, because nobody could ever create the emotions involved. And so I just figured out ways to do it because it was the goal, the intention, with the idea that if I could do it to myself and feel it myself, a reader would feel it as well. Yeah, I mean, there were a couple things that contributed to that. My brother's 4 years older than me, And my family moved around a lot because of things that my father did, so we would move about every 3 years. And also my father actually wasn't around that much because he worked so much. I mean, you do the kind of work he does, and you have to work for 16 hours a day. And so my dad wasn't necessarily around. He was either working or traveling. A lot of times my parents went with them, or my mother went with him. A lot of times my parents lived abroad while I was being educated in the United States. I would switch schools. I would just lie to them. Any drug addicts are all expert liars and manipulators. And the people who it's easiest to lie to and manipulate are the people who are closest to you. And I was pretty good at it. And damage then starts to be one of the reasons you drink. I mean, it's a nasty, sort of complicated cycle, but I think it initially starts off, for most people, almost every drug addict or alcoholic I know, is that you have these feelings inside of you, whatever they are, and you don't know how to deal with them, and you don't necessarily understand them, and you discover that substances make those feelings go away. So you use substances, the feelings go away, the substances wear off, and then they come back and they're stronger. And one of the reasons they come back stronger is because you feel guilt for using the substances to kill what you feel. And it becomes this vicious cycle where you feel more, you need more, you feel more, you need more. And eventually that cycle can develop into physical addictions where you literally cannot stop because your body has to have whatever the substance is. And so guilt certainly plays a part in it. I mean, people ask me a lot, what do I do? What do I do with someone I love? And you should tell them that you're worried. I mean, my advice would be tell them that you're worried about them. Tell them that you're scared about how they're living, and tell them that you love them, and tell them if they want help, you'll give it to them. And then I honestly advise trying to detach from them, because there's not going to be any good coming out of the life that they lead until they stop leading it. And it's only going to drag you into it if you don't detach. And then you hope that they do come to you for help at some point. No. I mean, the reason I was willing to sort of go to the facility is because at the point I went, I didn't have any other options. I mean, one of the things is I was wanted in 3 different American states at that point. I was wanted. I was physical addictions to cocaine and alcohol, and I was falling apart. And I had just had this accident where I fell down a fire escape. I knocked out my front 4 teeth, broke my nose, and broke my eye socket, and I was physically unable to really resist in any way. My parents were like, "We're going to take you to rehab." I was like, "Oh, all right. You got something for me to drink?" And then once I was there, I left once, and I thought about leaving every minute I was there. And then sort of I started to feel a little bit better. And just that little bit of feeling better was like a carrot in front of your face. You sort of chase it, and you feel a little bit that much better. And you just sort of stay. And then at a certain point, I had the doctors, at the facility I was in, the first thing they do is they do extensive testing on your body to see what you're like and what condition you're in. And one of the things they told me is that my body was falling apart, and that if I kept doing what I was doing, I was going to die soon. And so I was faced with that. It wasn't like I could avoid having to confront mortality anymore. I had to make the decision, do I want to live or die? And it was just a sort of a series of things that made me stay.
Okay.
I can't hear you. Giving free heroin? Do they do that here?
They talk about it. Some people are in favor
I mean,
to legalize that.
One thing about heroin is it has the highest recidivism rate of any drug. It is the hardest, generally the hardest drug to stop using. But I don't necessarily think that you should give drug addicts heroin. You know, it's literally giving them poison. I don't think you should give people cyanide or, you know, give people PCP or crack or anything else. The goal should be to get them off it. And it shouldn't be made any easier for them to stay on it. No, I don't. I don't think tobacco works to prolong my life at all, but I don't ask for it for free. And it's a decision I make. This might sound weird to you, but I don't generally smoke. I smoke when I come to do things like this because it makes me really nervous to come sit in front of a bunch of people I've never met and talk to them in a foreign country where I have no friends. And when I'm at home through my day-to-day life, I don't smoke. But I bought a pack of cigarettes this afternoon because this is nerve-wracking for me, and cigarettes help me calm down. And when I leave here, I'll throw whatever cigarettes I have left out. Thank you. I mean, honestly, probably nothing. The more I do it, the easier it becomes, but I'm a solitary person by nature. I spend my days by myself all day, every day. And I like that, and I enjoy that, and that's one of the reasons I do what I do, is so that I can have that time alone. And I don't think it's uncommon to get nervous when you have to come speak in front of a bunch of people.
I'm afraid that we have to stop now. Monique has been giving me the evil eye for about 5 minutes now. No, you haven't. So thank you, James.
Thank you. I'll sign your books if you have them. I got to go to the bathroom.
I hope you are still a little bit comfortable, James. Thank you for being so honest, and thank you, Ruth, for your introduction and your questions. I think very well posed. Before you can have your book signed by James outside of this room, I want to inform you about 2 upcoming events in January. Something we do with a program with the American Writers Festival, which is going to take place on the 22nd of February starting, and we'll have an evening the 23rd, together with the British Council and with 2 guests, John Lancaster and an American poet, M.A. Nezukumatatil, very difficult name. And then on January 27th, we will have an evening, true American program with a biographer, Deirdre Baer, and she wrote a biography on Carl Gustav Jung, controversial person also. To receive more information on these events and a little bit more about the Institute, you can also get that on your way out. I don't know if there are questionnaires given to you, but if they are, please fill them out and return them also in their information stand. And thank you so much for coming all. I think it was a very special evening, and it was very nice of you to be all here. Thank you, and have a safe journey back, and have a great holidays. Thank you. See you all next year.